Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Sefeo podcast with me, the host, Becky. And before we begin, I would like you all to subscribe to our Sefeo channel. Don't forget, and also don't forget to click the like button. Okay, guys? Okay, so let's get to it. Today, I am the host, and we will be talking about culture shock. But first, I would like to introduce to you guys our very, very special guest, all the way from the USA. So, hello, David. Good morning to you.
Hello, and good afternoon over there.
Yeah, 12 hours difference, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and you're still up?
Well, I'm always more of a night person. Even my work is night shift, so this is natural for me. But yeah.
Yeah. And good for me too. I like this time. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, David. And thank you so
Thank you.
much for your time. And so today, David, our topic will be culture shock. Okay, I think it's something like really, really interesting. I think we've all had things to do with culture shock. We all understand. Well, mainly we understand what this is. So let me get to the first question, David. In your opinion, what is culture shock?
I think it's your initial reaction to, you know, actually seeing a new culture and just new surroundings. Like not even
Mm-hmm.
just the culture. It could be even just the climate and the weather of an area that you're just not accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
So, I would sum it up like that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. It's all these different things in a different area that we've never experienced before, I suppose. That's what culture shock is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also things
Okay.
like food and other examples. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally know what you mean. Okay. So now we know what culture shock is. Let me get to the second question. What do you think really causes culture shock? And is it the same for everyone?
Well, I would definitely say it's not the same for everyone. Just because, some people adjust more quickly than others.
Hmm.
And others, they might not have such a strong attachment to where they're from or even their daily routine.
Yeah.
But things that could cause it would be like, say if you hadn't been exposed to other cultures very often, or if
Mm-hmm.
you are not used to traveling far from home,
Mm-hmm.
um, that would definitely factor in.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Um, Especially I think from moving to one culture to another culture that is really, really, really different, like drastically different. The effects are so much worse, I think, on someone when it's a lot different.
Yeah,
What
I,
do you
I
think?
would
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I was wondering, David, like, have you ever personally experienced culture shock?
For me, yes. I live in the southeast of the U.S.,
Hmm.
state North Carolina,
Hmm.
but I moved to Texas and I stayed there for 11 years. And
Wow.
for me, and that's located in the southwestern part of the country.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it has completely different cultural influences. It developed differently.
Hmm.
The legal system is different,
Mm.
politics, and even as far as climate, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
like where I'm from, it's very wet climate. It rains a
Mhm.
lot throughout the year. It's
Mhm.
heavily forested. And then when I went to Texas, and Texas is a big place. It has different
Yep.
climates also, but
Mhm.
where I was at in Central Texas, it's very hot, very arid and dry. I mean, you're only 2 hours away from the Chihuahuan Desert. Um,
Wow.
so,
Wow.
um, so it was a completely different atmosphere around me. Um,
Mhm.
and I mean, even with the food, it was completely different. I mean, even from the
Mhm.
type of meat used to, you
Oh.
know, barbecue, like what kind of woods were used to smoke the meat.
Oh,
Because
wow.
different climate, you have different types of trees that grow in your area.
Yeah.
Um, so it was at first going there. It was actually really fun because it was something new. It was something
Mm.
exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wasn't there as a vacationer or just for a short trip. I was moving there, so
Mm-hmm.
you know, things kind of changed after about 4 months.
Oh, 4 months, really? That quick?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. It does sound very different. Like I've seen things on Texas on TV, like about Texas. And to me, I think of like the Wild Wild West, honestly. That's how I
Well,
think of Texas.
some of that attitude remains, and even some of its legal system, its laws, did
Uh-huh.
not change from that time period.
Oh, wow.
Um, so it's one of the things that really sets it apart from the rest of the country, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, also a part of their history and their culture. I mean, they're really adamant about their Wild West history. Like
Mm.
the town that I stayed in was called Gonzales. It's actually where they actually had the first shots of the revolution fired. So
Oh.
historically it was pretty well known there.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the Wild West. What I was thinking of is they have what's now a museum. It used to be the old jail from the mid 1800s,
Uh-huh.
and it still had like the old dungeon style cells and even the gallows, which that's kind of
Wow.
disturbing. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
all kept preserved, and it just really showed how things were back then.
Oh, okay, okay. Wow. So they still have the gallows. I don't like seeing that kind of stuff, honestly. To be honest with you,
Yeah,
I hate seeing that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Luckily,
But
they're
you
not
meant,
used
mhm.
today. I was just saying,
Yeah,
luckily they're not used today. It's just
yeah,
it's a museum now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They better not be used today. Um, but you mentioned David that like even the meat down there's different, right?
Hmm.
Like, can you give me an
Yes.
example?
Okay, like for example, like here in North Carolina, we mainly have pig farms, so
Oh.
primarily the meat is mainly pork here,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
whereas Texas is mainly cattle country. It's known for its vast cattle ranching. So
Ah,
the
okay.
majority of meat down there is always beef.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I think another difference too is just even produce, like what can
mm-hmm,
grow. I
mm-hmm.
mean, yes, I mean in modern times now you can go to the grocery store and get things, that's imported from other states or even other countries.
Mm,
But if you were looking for like that,
mm-hmm.
that took a little bit of adjusting too as well.
Okay, okay. But honestly, what shocked you the most when you moved to Texas?
Um, okay, well, it sounds like I'm feeding into stereotypes here, but I think what got me is how relaxed the gun laws are there. Like,
Mm,
throughout most of the US, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people outside the US know about this, but you know, pretty much anyone is allowed to have a gun that's over the age of 18 as long as they're
oh
not a
wow.
convicted felon.
Okay.
And but in Texas, they take it a step further. They have what's called open carry laws, which
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
means that you can just walk into Walmart with a rifle strapped to your back or your pistol
Wow.
just hanging off of your pocket, and it's
Wow.
perfectly legal. And I was just not used to seeing that because normally, like even here, even if you're a hunter, you leave your rifle back in the truck. You don't take it
Uh-huh.
into the store with you. And
Oh, okay.
actually seeing people do that, I'm just like, what? Like,
You know what? That would freak me out, I think. I don't think I would honestly like from stuff you've said and how you've explained about Texas, it kind of sounds like its own country, really.
it once was at one point. It was
Ah,
the Republic of
okay.
Texas for almost
Mm-hmm.
20 years before it joined as the 23rd state. So
Mm-hmm.
that they still have a lot of that mentality too. They
Mm-hmm.
they take pride in the fact that they were once their own country, and
Mm-hmm.
even when they joined the U.S., unlike other states, they made an agreement with the government to be able to retain a lot of their laws that they had when they were a country.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another reason why the legal system there, it's vastly different from the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
US.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, interesting. Um, like you said that one of the things that shocked you the most was the gun laws, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I'm interested to know, like you said that you experienced quite bad culture shock when you went to
Mhm.
Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, did you ever get over it? That is my first question.
Um, Technically, no. I know that probably sounds bad. It was to the point where, like I said, I went down there, not to go too deep into my history, but I went
Mm-hmm.
down there because of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really trying to make it work with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing was, I really, after a short while, did not want to be down there, but I didn't want to leave her either.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed.
Okay,
And
okay.
it got to the point where, over time, I kind of came to resent the area. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like it. I didn't like a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
things
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not speaking badly on Texans because there are plenty of good people down there, and
Yeah.
actually many that helped me out a lot while I was down
Mm-hmm.
there, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, it was just to a point where all I wanted to do was go home. That's all I could think about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even small things like, for example, there's a lot of pine forests around here, so you'll
Mm-hmm.
smell pine, especially from the sap. So
Okay.
for a cleaner for my house, I would buy pine sol for the floors because it makes
Mm-hmm.
things smell like pine. It would make me think of home.
Ah, okay. Uh-huh.
Mm, things like that. And so yeah, I mean, I didn't really get over it really. It was to the point where after around 4 to 6 years, I just kind of gave up. I just kind of resigned myself to, well, I guess I'm here and I'm not going to go back home, so I'll just deal
Mm-hmm.
with it. So I mean, it's not exactly a positive way of overcoming it. I know.
But everyone deals with it differently, David, honestly. Like I have experienced culture shock too, and it took me like ages to get over it. Yeah, like you, but you didn't get over it. So, like, what do you think really affected you mentally down there? Like to the point where to the point where you didn't get over that culture shock, to the point where you kind of gave up.
Um, well, again, I mean, it kind of went down to just the whole relationship to where I felt like, I wasn't going to be able to leave without breaking out of that relationship, which I
Oh,
had
okay.
no intention of doing at that time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's why I just kind of came to terms with the fact that, I can't always be resentful and angry and depressed. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to live my life like that. So that's when
Yeah.
I started to just kind of slowly let things go and just, as they say, go with the flow, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I completely understand. It sounds like you had a very stressful time, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I do have good memories from when I was down there. And like I
Mm-hmm,
said, I met some incredible people.
mm-hmm,
And, for anyone that's wanting to visit there, I would definitely recommend it. Like, it has
mm-hmm,
great sights, great food,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, a very rich culture. But, at the same time, I didn't want to live there. you know,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep,
was
yep.
the difference.
Yeah, I get that. Like there are places where we maybe want to have a holiday, but to
Mhm.
actually live there, maybe not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, wow. Like I've personally experienced culture shock as well. I know how it feels. And I know to get over culture shock, you really need a good support system, really,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And so, did you have support getting over that?
Um, like when I mentioned that I met some good people down there, that wasn't until much later. You know,
Mm,
the first few years I was down there, the only people I really knew were, my ex, her family, and her friends, and
mhm,
really just people that I met at work or just around town here and there, but no
Okay.
one that I was really close with, no one that I could really relate to.
Mhm.
Um, Another part that I kind of noticed about Texas is they really take things to heart if you criticize their state or their way of life.
Mm.
And so it's not a good idea because then people are really not going to want to help you or not
Yeah.
sympathize with you anyways.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it really wasn't until really about 6 years down there that I got a coworker who was originally from Chicago, different part of the
Ah.
country from me even,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
still more in common with where I'm from than from Texas.
Ah,
And
okay.
and he had been down there for 20 years. So
Wow.
really being able to relate with him and having somebody else that knew what it was like and just having that exchange that actually helped me out a lot.
Yeah. I agree with you. Like when well, for me, like you know how I've been through culture shock when I moved from Australia to Indonesia. Something like that. To have a friend who can relate with us and relate with what we're going through, that helps like so, so, so much. But did you expect David to, I don't know, to have that kind of reaction to Texas? Did you expect that?
No, honestly, I didn't. Most of my life I've gone through a lot of changes and had to adapt to things quickly. But it was always within the area that, I live in
Mm-hmm.
and,
Mm-hmm.
like within the same state or at least the same region. So, this was something completely different. And
Mm.
it caught me off guard as well, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I guess back then, I mean, technology wasn't like it was now, I suppose. So, like, were you able to do any research before you moved there?
I mean, technically I could have. I mean, the internet was available then, I went to Texas, let's see, it was back in 2008,
Mm.
2009. So, I
Okay.
mean, it wasn't relatively that far behind. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you still had access to Google and Wikipedia and
Yeah.
the very early ages of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but no, that was really my mistake. I didn't research it. The only things I really
Mm.
knew about Texas was, what I'd seen on TV, the brief, footnotes that were taught to us in history over here, because obviously they're not really going to go that in depth into Texas history on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything else was just, mainly just stereotypes and things that I'd seen on TV. So I really had no real idea or clue of what it would really
Mm.
be like. And that
Okay.
was that was my mistake.
Yeah, I think that was my mistake too. Um, Not really knowing about the culture, thinking that everything was like I'd seen on my holidays when it wasn't.
Yeah.
So, like, would you recommend to people if they, for example, are thinking about moving somewhere that has a different culture, would you recommend that they like do some research?
Seriously, like do as much research as you can. Also, if you have a way like online of reaching out to people from that area, talk with them and don't be
Mm-hmm.
afraid to ask questions. Even if
Mm.
it seems like stupid questions, I mean, no question is a stupid question,
Yep.
especially, when it comes to where you're going and where your future goes.
Yeah,
So,
completely agree.
so I would definitely say do your research and try and gather up as much information as you can.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would help a lot, actually. It may have helped us a lot, David, if we had done
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
A lot, I think. Okay, well, honestly, really interesting. I never actually, like, honestly, I will be honest with you. Like I said to you, I always thought of Texas being like, the wild, wild west, that kind of thing, deserts and everything. I know that's such a stereotype. I'm not proud of that. But then when I looked Texas up and I saw, like, for example, cities like Houston
Mhm.
and other areas, I was like, whoa, it's pretty developed actually.
It shocked me because it's like two worlds within Texas. Because yes, you have like Houston, which is like America's fourth largest city, and it's a sprawling metropolis. It's insanely
Mm-hmm.
huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then other big cities too, like Dallas and Austin and San Antonio. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's crazy about it is because of how large this state is, um, you can go large distances and sometimes barely pass through a town, if there is
Wow.
any at all. So
Wow.
you'll have, like, for example, if you were in Houston, you
Mm-hmm.
would travel west, you would get into the suburbs outside of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then there'll be a short distance in between the suburbs and like a smaller town. And then it starts turning seriously rural, like to the point
Wow.
where you'll drive. Well, sadly, I don't really know the metric system, but I'll say it in our measurements. You
Okay,
could
sure.
drive literally 30 miles and there's not a town at all. Like there's just nothing.
Wow. Wow.
And you'll just see cattle ranches, you'll see what they call oil donkeys, which are like those oil pumps that go up and down and pump.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And that's about all you'll see for 30 miles, just nothing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Is it like it's in the movies? Like I've seen, like all those huge like desert and then all those huge like rocks and those all those formations. Is it like in the movies?
That was west of where I was at. That's West Texas, and that
Okay.
is the Chihuahuan Desert, and areas like
Ah.
Big Bend National Park, and the city of El Paso. But that was
Mm-hmm.
like really far west, like west of San Antonio.
Oh,
Um,
okay,
where
okay.
I was at, it was more, the best way to put it is prairie lands. Like it was very flat.
Mm-hmm.
The trees were very short, almost
Mm-hmm.
shrub-like,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of tall grasses. And then you did have cactus because cactus doesn't necessarily grow in the desert, just in
Mm-hmm.
drier climates. So you would see
Oh,
that as well. Um, but that was pretty much the scenery once you got into the rural areas. And also the
okay.
populations of the towns were really tiny. Like here in North Carolina, it's a bit more densely populated. So even what we
Mm-hmm.
call small towns,
Mm-hmm.
um, in Texas, I mean that'd be like a mid-sized to large town because
Oh,
there were
wow.
there were areas of Texas where they would call them towns, and it's like 200 people. That's it.
Oh, wow, 200 people. That's like teeny weeny.
Mhm.
Okay, well, so interesting. This helps me as well because I always thought, like I said, the wild, wild west desert. So when I looked the Texas up and I saw all these big cities, I was like, oh my gosh, I am so ignorant.
Well, I mean, we
Um,
all are until we do our research, so there's no
yeah,
shame in that.
that's so true. That is so true. And I was wondering actually, David, okay, and all this talk about Texas, I know that you're from North Carolina, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So I was wondering, like, for example, if someone like myself, or maybe other people from another country, or even like another state, even, what do you think would shock people the most in your area?
In my area, let me think. I'm not trying to draw a blank here, but I don't know. I guess maybe some of the foods that we have might be different because I mean again, even just for the whole US, like each region kind of has its own different types of foods that are eaten. Maybe like for example, if you're coming from Indonesia, depending on the time of year that you come here, if you come here during January and February, well, I can guarantee you the cold is going to shock you, especially if we actually have snowstorms roll into the mountains.
Ah,
Um,
mhm.
or even just maybe even some of the architecture because like for example they've got different culture groups that settled in different parts of the state. So like if you go to Winston-Salem up north of here, it's like 20 miles north of here. There's
Mhm.
a whole section of it that's mainly German descent. They call it Old
Oh,
Moravia.
wow.
And some of the houses there are built like old German style. I mean,
Mhm.
these are really old homes though, but they're historic. And then, of
Mhm.
course, if you go to the eastern part of the state, that was very heavily British. So
Mhm.
even the town names and some of the building styles that are from at least the 1800s and earlier
Mhm.
are still in some ways kind of British.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, interesting.
and then another thing, like for culture, like if you go up to the mountains, that was mainly settled by the Scottish, and every year they still have Highland games, just like they had in old Scotland, centuries ago. And
Yeah, I know them.
so you'll see people that are in kilts and bagpipes and just
Oh,
doing old
really?
traditional Scottish games. Yes, they do it. They do it
Wow.
every year,
Oh
and
my
they're very proud of that
goodness.
heritage.
Wow, I did
Hmm.
not know. I mean, that would be fun because like I have a Scottish descent, Scottish blood, so I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Wow. But like, okay, like for example, for us, okay, from Indonesia, okay, and we're Asian. Like, how would people in your area how do they take to Asians?
Well, it's kind of a touchy subject, and I guess how do I say it without being controversial? Like racism is an issue that my country is trying to deal with.
Yep.
It is definitely a problem. Um, I will say this. In the cities, people tend to be more open-minded, more accepting of other cultures, more global in thinking. But when you start going into very rural areas, well, in not all cases, because again, you can't generalize an entire people, but a lot of cases, the people are more accustomed to just what they're used to, and
Mm-hmm.
people that are similar to them. So when you throw in
Mm-hmm.
something that's different, they tend to not take to it as kindly. I'm not saying that it's always going to be that kind of experience. And again, there's plenty of nice, kind people living in rural areas as well.
Yep, I can
But
imagine.
but discrimination and racism is definitely more prevalent outside of the cities. So I mean, that would be the only thing I would say is, I guess, to be mindful of.
Yeah, I think that is one thing that I think should prepare themselves for actually. Because I saw I think it was in a video some not that long ago. Like there was this couple, right? And they visited America. They were from the UK actually, but one was of darker skin, and they called him a racial slur, like a racist slur. And
Yeah.
I was kind of shocked. So that's when I was like, should we be prepared? Like, I totally think that that would shock us a lot. Um, especially if you're not prepared, you know? So I think before for example, we visit, I mean, I know, like you said, not everybody is like that. Of course not. I mean, you've got your bad and your good people everywhere.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's one thing that we should consider before we go somewhere. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Not even just so that you have a good experience, but again, I'm not trying to sound completely negative about where I'm from or even my country, but I mean, all you have to do is watch the news to see what happens. I
Yeah.
mean, there's
Yeah.
some of the racism gets to a heightened level to where it becomes violent. So it's good to be aware of where you are visiting when you come and visit, and
Mm-hmm.
also kind of know what the norms are and what aren't,
Yeah.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, if you do your research on that and at least are aware of that, it it one will make your visit a lot more pleasant, something that will at least be something you can look back on with good memories. And
Yeah.
again, in some more extreme cases, it could be just a way of keeping yourself safe.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I can see that. I can see that really. Um, I don't know, like because from personal experience, yeah, culture shock is it's something that people take for granted, honestly. I feel that. I feel that people take for granted. And like with me, like when I was at school and people didn't really know, they didn't understand, they didn't care really. Yeah. So how do you think, for example, if we see someone who's a newcomer to our area or is a visitor or, coming to live or whatever, how do you think we should treat them to help them feel that they're they fit in, to help to make them feel like they're welcome? How should we treat them?
Well, I would say, for one, I mean, treat them the way you would want to be treated would be like the top thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, make them feel at home. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when you visit a place that you're not used to, you're nervous. You
Yeah.
don't really know what to do or say. So, ease the tension for them. Like actually, give them advice, or, maybe if they're struggling with something, just, help them out a little bit. Just kind of
Yeah.
set them on the right path.
I would
You
have
know,
to agree. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. One thing though that I think that people from Indonesia should be aware of is that in America, I know it's like this in Australia. In America, they're more physical, right?
um,
Um,
well, like when with greetings, I mean, yes, a handshake.
mm,
And especially like for America, we're known for having a firm handshake, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it's not any form of aggression or anything like that. It's just, especially in our culture, a firm handshake shows that you are genuine about your greeting. It shows that that you're putting commitment into it and that you're confident. You
mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
there are some cultures we might encounter that aren't used to that, and
Yeah.
some people might take it as like a form of being too rough or aggressive. It's not
Uh-huh.
meant to be that way at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean that would be one thing. As far as being physical, I mean also I guess one difference that I've heard just from the groups that we've talked on.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like sometimes it's like in America, it's not taboo for a male to hug a female, as just a greeting. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about like a long, prolonged hug, but just like a quick, friendly hug, and
Yeah.
then that's it. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand completely. Just I think that would shock a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the things that shocked me when I moved, that you know how like in the West, I know that for example if your friend is upset or something like that, you give them a hug, you help to reassure them that everything's going to be okay. People don't really do that here. It's more like a tap on the shoulder, it's going to be okay. So people don't really hug. So what happened to me, David, when I came here? I saw my friend crying and I wanted to give her a hug. And she was like, kind of uncomfortable. And I was like, I didn't get it. So it's yeah, it's very different. Very, very, very different. So people just don't as much. They just don't. I don't know why. It's just a cultural thing, I guess. So it's one of the
Um,
things that I think that, yeah, please go ahead.
well, I wasn't trying to cut you off. I was just thinking though. So in Indonesian culture, how would one show concern and empathy in a situation like that? Like, what would be considered the cultural norm?
Okay, good question. Um, well, going and hugging the person wouldn't really be the norm. That's what I felt. Okay. To show empathy, to show that you understand, you care, usually I don't know, there would be like a tap on the shoulder, to tell you it's okay. Maybe
Mhm.
show them that you're listening to what they have to say. But other than that, that's pretty much it actually. Or say something, to help reassure them that everything's going to be okay. But that's pretty much it. Not a huge hug, like
Yeah.
I'm so used to the huge hug and then just crying on somebody's shoulder. It's not really done here. So it's a big, big culture difference.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Gee.
it's a very, very different. Um, okay, so this is like been really interesting. It's actually an eye opener. Like a lot of things you told that I don't really understand about Texas, honestly. And like America as a whole, okay, the USA, sorry, the USA. I won't say America. America's like North America, South America, etc. The
Yeah.
USA, okay,
Okay.
okay. As an Asian, what city or what area would you suggest that we visit that would be very welcoming?
Well, I would say like, well, it's the usual tourist destinations, which I'm usually telling people like, no, go see other places. But it is true. The most multicultural cities are usually the most welcoming and open ones.
Uh-huh.
So yes, it would be places like New York City and
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles or Washington D.C., Boston,
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, and even in Texas. If you go to Texas, multicultural places like two cities I would highly recommend would be Austin, firstly, and one, it's their state
Ah,
capital, but it is a very how to put it, it's a very open-minded place. In fact,
okay.
like half the people that live there are not actually originally from Texas. They come from like
Oh,
other states like
really?
California. So so it
Mm-hmm.
is not like the rest of Texas, and
Mm-hmm.
that would be a place I would definitely say go to. And then Houston, although with Houston, just like a lot of major cities, and I'd imagine it'd be like this in other countries too, it has its good
Mm-hmm.
sections and its bad sections. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you really don't want to go into bad sections of town where there might be higher rates of crime. But for the most
Okay.
part, the tourist areas aren't like that anyway. So you won't
Mm-hmm.
actually really have to worry about that. It's more like,
Mm-hmm.
as we put it, straying off the beaten path. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just don't want to really do that sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you would recommend the big cities, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. I can
and
understand that.
also,
Mhm.
oh, sorry, and also,
No, it's
if
okay.
if you're wanting to see like nature, the national parks, most states have it at the very least, state parks, but they're basically land that's reserved to where it can't be developed. It's all natural, and
Mm-hmm.
you just
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the natural beauty of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's places like famous ones would be like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone National Park,
Oh
called the
yeah.
Geysers.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Those are national parks. Here, like in North Carolina, we have the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is,
Mm-hmm.
well, as the name implies, it's up in the mountains. It's heavily forested wilderness, lots of
Mm-hmm.
hiking trails, camping areas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I would definitely recommend going to places like that, the beaches,
Uh-huh.
especially depending on where you go. Keep in mind that the coastlines, because America is a very big place, can vary from what region you visit. So if you go to like Northern California, well, that's all rocky cliffs for beaches. So it's not
Oh,
exactly a place you're going to lay
okay.
out and get suntans. But
Yeah.
like Southern California, Florida, even especially like North Carolina beaches, we have like the barrier
Mm-hmm.
islands off the coast that you can drive to by bridge or take ferries to, and it's beautiful out there. You know,
Oh
so
wow.
I would recommend places like those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure all of this will help people wanting to go to America, help them decide where to visit to minimize culture shock, I think, because honestly, it's not a nice feeling. I can tell you that. It's something that you want to minimize as much as possible, I think. And so David, my last question is, what would you advise? Okay, what would you advise to people, or what's your advice to people who are planning to go somewhere, not just go for a holiday, but stay for an extended length of time
Mhm.
in a certain area where it's a different culture? What would you advise they do before they actually move?
Okay. Well, for one, look into the area and see if that place really provides your needs on a daily basis. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we are talking about this on the group earlier, like
Yep.
in America, with transportation. Okay. One thing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people aren't aware of is most of America lacks, a decent public transit system. You will find,
Yeah.
public transit in like the really large cities and even
Mm-hmm.
mid-sized cities. You might have a small bus service, but the routes are very limited, and the times that they come are, well, not very often.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so if you're coming, like, say, to America, for example, you would definitely need to sort out a way for transportation as far as either someone here that you know giving you rides or being able to rent a car. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you're, again, in a majorly populated area, you could even, they have apps where, like Uber, where you can actually call
Ah,
basically like a taxi service,
yep.
to get around.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, don't come over here expecting to like just hop on the train and just travel around, or
Mm-hmm.
even the buses. It doesn't work like that. So
Yeah.
for people going to an area, always be aware of things like that, like how is the transportation in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Look into things of what is the crime rate of that area, because that's also
Mm,
very
yeah.
important. Some
Yeah.
places are safer than others.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really, look at like what is America's crime rate, because it varies from different
Uh-huh.
areas. Some places are
Mm-hmm.
completely safe and you wouldn't have a worry at all. Other places,
Mm.
well, you'd be looking over your shoulder every day, you know? So I mean, it just
Ah,
depends on where
okay.
you go.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Interesting.
guess, another thing also is, look into the area of what kind of things do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you are someone that's really into the arts, like theater and museums and music, well, New
Mm-hmm.
York City would be right up your alley. But going
Ah.
to a place like, say, oh, I don't know, Atlanta, eh, that's more of an entertainment place. That's
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of different kind of clubs and bars and things like that. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it just depends on what you are looking for.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So, like, for example, if you were a beach person, I
Hmm.
guess you wouldn't advise going to like a state in the middle of the USA, right? So far from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
beach.
Yeah, or even like some coastal areas, like I mentioned, like if you're going to, like, say, Seattle up in Washington State, I mean, yeah, that's on the coast, but it
Mhm.
doesn't really have beaches, so you're not going
Uh-huh.
to be able to enjoy that. You'd want to choose a place more like Miami, Florida, which
Oh
is
yeah.
known for its beautiful beaches and tropical
Yep.
weather, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like don't go somewhere that you're like it's gonna obviously make you stressed.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like what else? I mean, you told me about like the crime rates and for example, transportation, how to get around, what you're interested in. What else should we I don't know. How else should we prepare ourselves? What else should we find out about a certain area before we go there?
Well, let's see. I mean, also just looking up the culture and beliefs of an area, because that can
Mhm.
give you more of an insight on what is acceptable and what isn't. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
okay, for example, where I live at, it's a very conservative religious part of the U.S. It's, primarily Christian.
Uh-huh.
So, you would probably want to do your research on, what kind of things would be acceptable in that kind of culture and what isn't.
Mhm.
Just like if
Mhm.
you go up north, I mean, there's still religion, of course, but it's a lot less religious. It's not conservative. It's a lot more liberal minded, or at least what they would call over here progressive. But
Okay. Okay.
whereas, so there are some regions of the country that might be more conservative and traditional, and then other
Mhm.
areas that are just completely the opposite. Um, so I would look into, again, like what the culture of the area is around you. Does it suit you? Does it suit your
Mhm.
personality?
Mhm.
Um, because again, like if you are yourself, traditional and conservative, then yeah, certain areas might fit in better for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you get what I'm
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But David, for example, we have someone who has to go somewhere and they don't have a choice. Okay, they don't have a choice like to where they can go. So
Um,
okay, maybe everything is like totally different to what they like. How do you recommend or suggest how to cope with that kind of thing?
um, let's see. I guess just the one thing. if I learned just going to Texas, don't constantly dwell on negative things when you do come
Mm.
across negative things.
Uh-huh.
Try your best to, focus on the things that you really like and see where you can expand from that. And
Mm-hmm.
because, like for example, like when I went there, I really loved the food. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, granted, it caused quite a bit of weight gain there too, but but it got me into like, well, okay, well, what kinds of different foods do they have? And then you start finding out about the different cultures. Like, for example, Central Texas, it's a mixture of German, Czech, and Mexican. So you've
Wow.
got like three different kind of culture groups there with three different types of foods, and that was
Mm-hmm.
really fun to explore. And then, of
Yeah.
course, you have stuff that's just uniquely Texan, like it's just a fusion of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm not saying just go crazy on the food. Like you gotta watch the weight too.
It does sound good though.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
But,
guess yeah. Sorry. Please
no,
keep going.
but I was gonna say, but obviously, don't just focus on food, but whatever it is that you like in the area that you're at, try and focus on, see where it leads you, because you might find other things that you enjoy and like doing also that go along with it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like with
Yeah.
me,
Mm-hmm.
for example, where I was
Mm-hmm.
at was a hot climate. So over there, they like to go what they call tubing, which is, you have a big
Oh.
inflatable air tube and you go down the
Uh-huh.
river,
Yes,
and
I know that. Uh-huh. Yep.
so, it's a really good way to, one, cool yourself off from the heat, but, while you're there, you get to enjoy yourself at the river and you meet
Mhm.
new people. You might be able to strike up more conversations and find out more about things you didn't know about from there.
Ah,
So
okay. So,
I guess,
yeah.
oh, sorry. I was just
No,
saying, I guess
no
what I'm saying is
worries.
just keep yourself active, and it doesn't mean necessarily active like going for a hike or a jog, but just keep your mind active and then
Mhm.
also just get out, because if you hold yourself up in your house and dwell on things, it won't help things either.
Yeah, that is so true. And actually get worse probably.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. So what you're saying is that if somebody wants to move somewhere where they don't have a choice really, they have to go there, they have to move there. Find something positive to focus on, I guess, and
Yes.
don't dwell on all the negatives, right?
That would be my
Okay.
best advice on that, to be honest. Because I mean,
Yeah.
if you're in a situation where you're going there and you have no choice of actually leaving, um, it's I should have taken my own advice years ago, but it's really just focus on the positive.
Yeah. You know what? It's easier said than done, actually. It
It
is
is.
easier said than done. Way easier. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, David, for that advice. I couldn't agree more with you. And I hope that all our listeners, like if there is anyone who is planning to move somewhere, I mean, even to go study in another country, which is usually like 2 or 3 years, and you would probably experience some type of culture shock. I can't believe that you wouldn't, but you
Yeah,
probably would. And hopefully, what we've spoken about today will help these guys out. You know how to prepare
I hope so
themselves.
too.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that anyone who's listening to this just be well prepared, do your research, as David said, understand where you're going to go, understand the culture. So don't go somewhere and be totally blind, meaning not knowing anything. It's not a good idea.
Mhm.
Not a good idea at all. So, firstly, David, I really, really want to thank you so much for
And
being
thank
my
you for
guest
having me
today.
on here.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I always enjoy talking to you. It has been like I've had so much fun. I always have so much fun. And it was an eye opener, even for me, like about what you told me about Texas and how to, I guess, prevent culture shock, like really, really bad culture shock. something that I should have known. Like you said, you should have known too, which we didn't. So I think that's probably it from me, David.
Okay.
So once again, thank you so much, and thank you to all our listeners. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all again next time. And do not forget to subscribe to the Sefeo channel, and don't forget to like this video, okay? And I will see you next time, guys. Okay, bye.
Take care.
Take care.